Welcome to another Press Herald Newsroom Live. Thank you for being with us tonight. I hope we found you safe, healthy, and warm tonight because it is getting cold. And I wanted to just thank our subscribers. It's your support that makes our journalism possible because, whoa, it has been a busy year for news. From the pandemic to the election, there has never been another year that's really called on our newsroom to be there every step of the way for our subscribers like we have been this year. So much has changed as a result of the pandemic, from hybrid schooling, outdoor dining, mass trips to Hannaford, and the coming retail holiday season will be no different. Things will look quite different this year. And that, of course, is our topic tonight. And we are so thrilled to have a great panel who are all living the changes and challenges of the holiday retail season. So let me introduce you to our moderator. Our moderator tonight is Craig Anderson. He is the business editor at the Press Herald. He joined us about 7 years ago as a business reporter, and earlier this year was promoted to business editor. And I haven't even seen Craig in person to congratulate him since we've been out of the office since March. But he's doing a great job. Already, because you know what? When you're the business editor at a newspaper in Maine, you have a job like no other, covering the standard sectors like the economy, real estate, but then add on tourism, lobster, and marijuana. That's right. So, wow, that's a lot of sectors to cover. So, excited for our panel tonight and to hear their insight. Later, Craig's going to ask you if you have any questions and pop them into the Q&A, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. It's really hard to pick questions out of the chat, but do say hello and in the chat and let us know where you're watching from tonight. So again, thank you for being with us. I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. I want to remind you the Press Herald will not be published on Thanksgiving. You're going to get your giant stuffed paper on Wednesday this year to give you more time to read it. And with that, over to Craig and our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So we're hoping to get some sense this evening of what retailers are doing differently this holiday season and how consumers are responding and how they're handling these very unusual circumstances that we're in. And I've got a great panel here to talk about these issues. I'll start first with Curtis Picard. He's the president and CEO of the Retail Association of Maine. They represent all the retailers in the state. And second, we have Mary Alice Scott, executive director of Portland Buy Local. That's an organization that represents local businesses in Portland. And we also have Greg Elder, Vice President of Retail at LL Bean, and he, among other things, oversees all the retail and outlet stores for LL Bean in 18 states, including Maine. So I thought a good way to start out would just be to ask Curtis to sort of give us the lay of the land of how are things going for retailers since the pandemic? How are they going this holiday season, and sort of what are you hearing from them?
Sure. And thanks, Craig, and thanks, Lisa, for asking us to be part of this panel tonight. Very happy to be here. I've been running the association now for 13 years and started my position really when the Great Recession started. And when we got through that, I thought to myself, I never want to live through anything like that again. And then we have this year, which is multiple times more challenging than that was. And normally this time of year, I'm looking forward to the Thanksgiving week, to Black Friday, to Small Business Saturday, to Cyber Monday, and all the great events and things that happen around the holiday season. This year, it is definitely much more of a challenge trying to figure out and navigate what this season is going to look like. It's not your typical between Thanksgiving and Christmas timeframe that we're looking at. For retailers, this is something we've been focused on for quite a while and strongly encouraging people to shop early this year. As we all know, we're still in the midst of this pandemic. The numbers in Maine are actually increasing very significantly, and that's a major concern. It's fascinating to me and concerning to me as well that just 3 weeks ago we were talking with the administration about possibly allowing more customers in stores because our numbers were so low, and in 3 weeks' time that has changed dramatically. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to keep the current numbers of customers in stores, but we also want to make sure people are being safe and shopping safely as we try to navigate between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I maybe I'll just start first question with you, Curtis. If I'm a shopper now going out to do holiday gift buying, what am I likely to see that may be different from what I'm used to?
Well, in terms of different, I mean, you got to look at the whole year. I mean, at a certain level, we've all become accustomed now to different measures you need to make sure you need to take when you go shopping. Without question, wear your mask. Make sure you have a mask on when you go to any store. That's been the message throughout the state for a long time, but it's more imperative now than ever. But I think consumers have already adapted quite a bit to making sure they're maintaining their physical distance from one another. They recognize that stores are limited in the number of customers that they can have. We've been advising people to make sure you have a plan to go in and shop. And that's been one of the real challenges for retailers. I mean, retailers have always lived and breathed and on getting more customers into your store. And right now you have to kind of flip that 180 and think about it in a different way, to think about how we can safely process customers in an efficient way. And from a consumer point of view, it makes it a little bit challenging because you need to kind of go in with a plan. And it's not the same level of browsing and just poking around necessarily that a lot of consumers, including myself, like to do. So it's definitely a lot more challenging this year. That's why we're encouraging people to plan ahead, make sure you have patience with your fellow consumers, and patience with the retail employees that are trying to do the best they can to serve you and get through this like everybody else.
Mhm. How about at LL Bean, Greg? How are things going, and what is LL Bean doing differently this year in its retail stores?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Craig and Lisa. And I would echo a lot of what Curtis said. It's more about what hasn't changed this season. A couple of big beats that I would kind of detail that we've seen over the course of COVID and certainly have been as pronounced as we enter the holiday season. First is just a massive migration towards online shopping. Just the ease and convenience and the safety of such. Will continue, but at the same time, there are still lots of customers that prefer the brick and mortar shopping experience, and they're coming in with a purpose. So while traffic is, certainly materially down, our conversion results are up, and those people are really coming in with a mission to purchase. So much energy and intensity is being focused on just the safety of the experience, and that is just prevalent in so many areas. And I would just urge any retailers that are listening to just make your associate safety and your customer safety really your first, second, and third priority. It's just so imperative. Our customers are telling us that, and I just can't underscore that enough. So those have been, huge changes and have resulted in, a lot of efforts. And then there's just tremendous uncertainty. What will Black Friday bring? I don't think it will resemble anything like it has in the past. And then there's dynamics that we have are going to be a byproduct of COVID. There are certainly going to be inventory outs. The supply chain has been severely stretched across kind of all facets of retail. And then, as Curtis said, we too are encouraging people to buy early and ship early, as the carriers are really going to be very, very stretched. There are reports that say there'll be about 4 million plus packages that will be over UPS, FedEx, and USPS capacity. So there's just a lot of dynamics that are new and unique that will impact both customers and retailers this season for sure.
Yeah. And Mary Alice, how about retailers in Portland that you work with? What kind of things are they doing differently this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities to kind of like what Greg and Curtis have said. Portland by Local represents mostly really small businesses, kind of the mom and pop shops that you think about. Over half of our members have 5 employees or fewer, and so they're really the small scale stores. And the pandemic really forced them to improve their game online. The websites that a lot of these stores had relied on maybe didn't have full inventory before, didn't have the ability to browse. But during the shutdown in March and April, a lot of those small businesses took the opportunity to improve their websites while they were out of their stores, and really make sure that that was an easy way to communicate with their customers. And so I'm hopeful that one of the few silver linings we can look toward is that customers will find it easier to shop online for local businesses. But pre-pandemic, 1 of every $2 spent online is spent with Amazon. And so I'm really hopeful that during this holiday season, we can emphasize the message that shopping local online is a possibility and it's easier than ever, and that those businesses have kind of made it an option to do so.
That's great. So one of the things I was curious about is, and I think Greg mentioned this, and I wanted to circle back around to it. But what are some of the concerns or questions that you're getting from consumers that you don't normally get? Maybe I'll switch back to Greg to start us off with that question.
Yeah, well, building on what Mary Alice said, there's certainly a lot of incoming questions around all things related to safety. What are your safety protocols? What are your sanitation, cleanliness, and hygiene protocols? Hours are shifting, capacities are shifting. There's mask enforcement. So there's a lot of inquiries about that, and there's a lot of agility that retailers have needed to exercise kind of in response to the changing environment out there. And then again, as Mary Alice detailed, retailers have worked really quickly to expand their omni-channel capabilities. So that's mobile checkout or contactless curbside or reservation shopping. These are all things that retailers big and small have stood up in very short order in response to just the overwhelming customer demand around just a safe and neat and orderly shopping experience. So the days of customers kind of tolerating a chaotic retail experience are certainly not going to be tolerated this peak, and just tremendous interest in all things that retailers are doing to protect their associates and their customers would be, without question, the #1 concern that we're fielding.
I see. And before I move on to asking the next person, I wanted to just mention that to anyone in the audience, if you'd like to submit a question for our panelists to answer, please use the Q&A window that you should see down there next to the chat box, rather than putting the question in the chat box, because it might get lost in there. But if you put it in that Q&A chat box, then we'll be sure to circle back around to your question. So Curtis, I wanted to ask you about staffing, and how does staffing work differently now? Are retailers having to bring in more people to do more functions, or are they using less people because there are fewer customers? How's that working out?
Yeah, and I think LL Bean will be able to chime in on this as well, but staffing is still very much an issue. Finding enough people that are willing to work in the industry this time of year is still a concern. So even though we do have a lot of people out of work, there's still this separation between the jobs that are available and the people that are perhaps able to fill them. And that's been a challenge throughout the pandemic, and that was certainly a concern before the pandemic as well. The economy was cooking along, and every industry, not just retail, was still very much desperate for employees, and that's still the case today. going through the holiday season. I know LL Bean specifically started advertising for people earlier than ever to try to get them in, and also recognizing that we're trying to stretch the holiday season out so much more this year. And like I said, not just focus on that period between Black Friday and the Christmas holiday. I did also want to build on something that Greg had said in how retailers have adapted. I've told a lot of people that the technological advancement that has happened, especially among small retailers, pretty much jumped 5 years within a few months. So back in March and April, when things were shut down and curbside was the only option, retailers really needed to shift. And I'm talking specifically about small retailers. I mean, we've seen the rise of the Amazons of the world, and online shopping becoming easier and easier, but you've also seen other larger brick and mortar multi-state retailers increase their buy online, pick up in store options, and now we're seeing that trickle down to the smaller retailers, because they needed to do it based on the situation we were in. So I've always said retail has always been and always will be super competitive, but the technological advancement that retailers have done during this pandemic is nothing short of stunning, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Mary Alice, one question that kind of leads out of, I think, what Curtis said is, so this idea of trying to stretch out the retail, the span of the retail season, the holiday shopping season, in what ways are your members doing that? How do you get people to spread out their shopping instead of doing it all in one big rush?
Yeah, I mean, one way is by doing things like this and telling people how important it is, right? The American Booksellers Association is a great national organization that does a lot of work supporting independent bookstores. And they did a campaign that they launched actually October 1st that they called October is the New December. And then they have a suite of marketing materials that local bookstores and organizations like ours could use to really promote that message. And then another suite of materials to use the November is the New December message to really encourage folks to understand that there's going to be shipping bottlenecks, but also we want to spread out the number of people who are in stores at any moment. It's not just about the supply chain, but also about making sure that we don't have that mad rush of people at a door at any given moment. And so I think that message has been getting through to folks for sure. And big online retailers, kind of like what Curtis was saying, they really launched theirs about a month ago. The big campaign started about a month ago. And having those kind of go live and get national attention helps to make consumers understand the need to shop early, and that the drive is there for people to start.
Sounds like a bad year for procrastinators, huh?
Definitely.
I think that will be the case. Yeah, I mean, Greg said he heard 4 million products could be left, but I had actually heard I heard the possibility of 700 million products or packages. Maybe that's the total number that gets shipped. But USPS, FedEx, they're all saying there's just not the capacity to sort that number. So the bottlenecks are inevitable.
And they're issuing retailers such as, we've got kind of negotiated quotas of how much actual retailers can process. So I guess it's good to be UPS, FedEx, and UPS right now.
Yeah. And they'll charge actually different amounts depending on the timing of things. One of the messages that I tell people all the time is that free shipping is not free. You're paying for it somewhere, some way, somehow. And so one of the things that local businesses I think have been resistant to do is to have shipping kind of as an option, because they a lot of times can't afford with their margins to have free shipping as an option. And consumers are often turned off by having the shipping added on at the end. So I always encourage folks to just remember that shipping is never free. Someone is paying for it somewhere, but having it come on to you at the end just means that you're helping the small business out by paying it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to also ask you guys about sales events, because obviously that's a big part of the holiday shopping season. People lining up and getting in on sort of limited time only deals. How is that being handled differently this year? Curtis, do you want to
Yeah,
speak on that?
I have a great example of that because in my mind and in my household, Rennie's early bird sale is really the official kickoff to the holiday shopping season. And what they do in normal years is, that Saturday morning in early November, you save 20% off of everything from 6 to 9 a.m. And the Rennie's family recognized that, that model definitely was not going to work this year. And so they got really creative about it. And what they ended up doing was they tapped into their email list. They encourage their followers and their, fans of Rennie's to sign on to their email list. And all those email folks got their 20% off coupon that they could use over 4 days instead, that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, to kind of spread the crowd out. And they recognize they actually may be giving away that discount to more people than they normally do, but they felt it was an important way to maintain people's safety. I haven't spoken to the Rennie's family in the last week to see how it actually went, but I think because I did shop myself over that weekend, and the crowds were decent but manageable, and so I think it worked out. And that's just an example of one retailer trying to be creative with the promotions this year to try to find that balance between still doing sales but keeping people safe. But the other thing to remember about the Rennie's early bird sale is, while it's great for consumers to save 20%, that's not a viable business model for them to do year round. And so that's why they had always done it on a particular day. And so stretching it out over 4 days does have an impact on them as well.
Yeah, I see. How about at LL Bean, Greg? Are you handling sales promotions differently this year?
Very similar to what Curtis alluded to, just trying to pull a little of that volume forward for all of those, reasons, and kind of stretch the traffic at the same time away from really concentrated periods. So, for example, last year we had the vast majority of our stores open at some point Thanksgiving Eve for, midnight madness, doorbuster type things across our 54 store fleet, and that's just not something that we're doing this year. We're not going to open any stores on Thanksgiving, and we'll be following regular mall hours, which are much more kind of reasonable this year. The average center, if last year opened at midnight or 5 a.m., 6 a.m., going to defer that probably till 7 or 8. And you're just there's so much emphasis on just, a much calmer, neat and orderly kind of handling of the traffic and the transaction flow, just for everybody's safety. So very, very similar to what Curtis was alluding to.
Any additional thoughts on that, Mary Alice, on how your members are handling things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very similar. People have moved things. Coffee by Design, their typical customer appreciation sale happens kind of after the holiday, after Thanksgiving. They've moved it up. It's going on now, and it's available online. I think shifting things online, moving things early, spreading them out. That's the theme.
That is.
Well, let's move on to some of the trends that maybe you've noticed happening or coming into shape this year. I guess I'll just start open-ended. I'll start with Curtis again. Have you noticed any kind of interesting trends, whether they pertain to buyer behavior or retailer behavior? Anything, sort of on a macro level that's going on?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And while there are always news stories about the large online retailers, the Amazons of the world, continuing to gain market share every year, I think it's important to note that there really, over the past few years, has been a significant increase in shopping to support local retailers and shopping with a purpose. It's been a noticeable difference. I think things like Small Business Saturday becoming its own thing over the last 5 or 6 years has helped with that. And one of the things we've always emphasized, and I know Mary Alice does as well, is that you need to support your local retailers more than just one day a year. You need to support them year round. But And I would also add that there was, the mindset that younger people, millennials, only wanted to shop online. They didn't really want brick and mortar stores. And what we saw last year and a little bit the year before, and hopefully we'll continue to see that trend this year, is that the generation below them, the Gen Z, actually really seemed to appreciate the brick and mortar experience. And we saw a dramatic increase last year of those younger people moving back into the stores, wanting to shop in person. This year, of course, everything is completely different, and we'll be able to look back sometime in 2021 back at this period and get a better view of what really happened. But I'm hopeful that those trends will continue because they have been noticeable and have been documentable.
Yeah. How about you, Mary Alice? Any big trends that are starting to emerge, either just through the pandemic or specifically the holiday season this year?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I thought was sort of interesting just about this year in general is that folks are really thinking about the here and now. And during times of crises, people tend to spend a little bit more on kind of like small to medium luxuries, and spend a little less on kind of like large purchases. And so there's been a lot of talk that like decorations will be a category that will be increasing in sales. Formal wear, no surprise, not doing great this year. But work from home clothes are an exception to the rule. I was thinking about this earlier, and I was lamenting that my mom is not a Press Herald subscriber. She doesn't live in Maine, and so I can't tell her like in a subtle hint like, get me leggings. I can't use this channel to kind of for my own purposes. But so there are kind of some interesting, like the clothing retailers. I'd be interested to hear kind of what Greg has to say too, that the clothing retailers who we work with have been really struggling, I think, more than most. But there are opportunities kind of with other businesses to kind of maximize taking advantage of people's desire to make something feel special in this really tough year.
Yeah. What about you, Greg?
Yeah, what we've have sold and are selling just rides the chronology of the pandemic, if you will. So think back to March and bikes and boats, work from home items, athleisure, slippers, cozy, flannel. I mean, as the work from home became the reality, all of those merchandise groups just absolutely exploded and have shown continued strength. As we moved into summer, hunting and fishing and water sports and outdoor furniture and fire pits, as the benefit, for us has just been, Mainers and Americans are reconnecting in the outdoors and with the outdoors in ways they never would have imagined, and really the pandemic has forced. So certainly that has been a benefit for us, as we are squarely right there in the outdoor spaces, and people are coming to us for all things, cozy outdoors and sporting related. And then as we've moved into fall, we've seen a significant uptick in layering pieces and outerwear as people now face the reality of fall and winter socialization, recreation, and what that's going to look like as we move into these cold, dark days and nights. So it's really followed all of the kind of movement to the pronounced of the outdoor activities coupled with the indoor realities. And things, and to Mary Alice's point, things more refined items, pinpoint Oxford and chinos, are not performing well in favor of much more versatile, cozy, athleisure type, performance type cozy pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense. Curtis, have you heard any interesting anecdotes about, unusually popular items or surprisingly popular items this year?
Well, in addition to what Greg was saying, yeah, definitely sporting equipment, outdoor equipment is one of the categories that often gets highlighted, but also home improvement. People are fixing up their houses. They're recognizing they're spending more time there. We've also seen an uptick in pet products and pet care. a lot of folks have, gotten themselves a new puppy or because they're working from home more. And so those sectors seem to be doing, better than other categories. So it's going to be interesting to see it play out. There are a lot of challenges out there still. I can't emphasize enough that the summer was a challenge. The limitations that were on Maine in terms of tourists that normally visit here has a tremendous impact on retail, but also our hospitality and tourism businesses as well. That was a challenge, and although we saw a little bit of a rebound in August, it didn't make up for losing, May, June, and July. And now, as we're trying to navigate this holiday season with rising case counts, I'm hopeful we're going to be able to make it through the end of the year with the restrictions that are currently in place staying in place, and that we're able to do it, because this last quarter is critically important to the retail sector. There's 85,000 people that work in retail in Maine. Those are a lot of jobs. We're one of the largest private employment sectors in the state. So there's a lot riding on it.
Yeah.
And for many years, there was this notion of this migration towards, gifting experiences. The notion of, people are buying and accumulating fewer and fewer material items and spending more time on experiences. And then oddly, with the pandemic, so many of those experiences, whether they be travel or leisure or dining or entertainment, just really aren't, viable right now. So interestingly, this season at minimum will be a pivot back to, feel good material, cozy things that make you feel good, safe, and warm. I think will continue to experience a significant uptick.
That makes sense. Mary Alice, I wanted to ask you if you have a sense that among your members, if any of the things that they've had to adapt to and change because of the pandemic will outlast the pandemic, will continue on in perpetuity, and what might those things be?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I have heard from folks who, because of their newly expanded online presence, have connected with customers that they never would have connected with before. And I think that is a permanent change. I think folks have seen that that's an important channel and that it needs to be maintained. It can take a lot of work. And so I think that's, if there are kind of like tech developers on the call who have ideas to simplify small business inventory management online, I think there's a big opportunity there. Yeah, but I think the understanding of the kind of modern communication that the businesses who had the biggest social media presences, who had built out their email lists, who had made online ordering easier, were the businesses who saw the most success. And it's hard to do business in 2020, and it was hard in 2019 without those channels. So folks have spent the time kind of making those more permanent.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what about you, Curtis? Have you noticed any other things that are happening through the pandemic that you think will become permanent fixtures among retailers?
Yeah, I think the things that Mary Alice we're talking about is absolutely true. We've seen also an increase in personal shopping experiences, as well as a way to better cater to a specific customer base. So as I said before, retail has always been and always will be competitive, and they're trying to find new and different ways to do things. But at the end of the day, consumers are always in the driver's seat. And that's a challenge. So last year at our annual meeting, we had brought together 4 generations of the Rennie's family on one stage to kind of just talk about their family business. And now, although much like LL Bean, we all love LL Bean, we all love Rennie's, it's a main icon in the retail world. They emphasized how hard they have to work on their brand to make sure they're still delivering for their consumers each and every day and each and every year. And we can't take LL Bean or Rennie's or Martin's or any business for granted. It takes hard work to do it. But consumers are ultimately in the driver's seat. The pressures that are out there on pricing, where they can oftentimes find things cheaper online than in the local store, is a constant pressure. It's a difficult business to be in, but at the end of the day, once we're through this pandemic, we're hopeful that we'll be able to rebound quickly and get things back to normal.
Yeah. How about you, Greg? Anything that'll stay with LL Bean that you learned or adapted to through this process?
Yeah, I think there's several things, Craig, that would apply to Bean or I think any other retailer out there. The first is that brand stores that really have a bona fide commitment to purpose are going to fare better than others for sure. This notion of more and more people, believe it or not, there are a lot of people that experience digital internet shopping for the first time during this pandemic, and that's going to sustain market share. Will continue to grow in the digital channels, but that doesn't mean customers aren't going to return to stores. They will, but the expectations and services that those stores are going to need to offer, many of those kind of buy online, pick up curbside, or buy online, ship from store, those types of functionalities have really become table stakes to kind of some of our earlier conversations. So having those digital capabilities is going to be more important than ever. And work from home. There is every indication that who would have thought that even post-pandemic, the notion of employee-employer flexibility enabling significant portions or durations of working from home, have every reason to believe that's going to be continuing. So that coupled with what kind of permanent safety / ease and speed expectations customers have post-pandemic, I think are all going to be around, if not permanently, for quite some time.
I see. Well, before we get to audience questions, I wanted to ask each of you if you had any advice for consumers based on what you've learned from your either your own company or your member companies. Mary Alice, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have nailed the point home that the shopping early is the most critical piece. I also, one of the things that I highlight all the time is that when people go to shop online, about 50% of people will start by just typing in Amazon and then typing in what they're looking for. And so I really encourage you to even just go to Google and type in what you're looking for, and then type in Portland. And you'll be shocked by how easy it is to find local businesses that way. I think a lot of times my organization sometimes operates as a concierge service where someone will say, where can I get X locally made? And I love doing that. It's pretty fun, but Google's very good at it. And I just highly recommend that folks start with Google rather than Amazon.
All right, good advice. How about you, Greg? Any advice for shoppers out there?
Yeah, I would echo shop early, ship early, shop at retailers that you feel safe in, and there's really no reason to patronize a retailer that isn't taking safety to the highest level of detail and seriousness. And be flexible. Retailers are working very hard to be agile and to respond to just a sea change of daily changes. So shop where it's safe, and then certainly would just implore customers to extend every patience and courtesy to the retailers that they're really trying to do their best out there.
Thanks.
Together we can get through this.
Yeah. How about you, Curtis? What advice would you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Patience, planning, shopping on less busy hours, either early morning or late at night. Try not to go on the busier times. Also consider buying gift cards, because that's a great way to get people back into the stores in 2021. We're going to need that as well. And to Mary Alice's point about, finding your local retailers, I was very impressed with the Bangor Region Chamber of Commerce with their recent campaign that came out with, which is there's a member for that. And it speaks to exactly what Mary Alice was saying, is that there are a local business that can usually meet your needs. So take advantage of that as well. And finally, please, everybody, wear your mask. It's critically important.
Thank you. There's a question that I think segs pretty well into what Mary Alice was saying, so I'll ask you this question. Can you tell us some local stores that are offering online shopping for local customers, and what are
Yeah.
some of those?
So I'm actually gonna just put in the chat box, we made a local gift guide that has about 60 businesses that you can start from. We have a directory too. It actually is being, it crashed because COVID 2020, everything that bad can happen will. So we're rebuilding it, but this is a really great place to start. So it's just portlandgiftguide.com, and it's divided into categories, and every category has direct links to all of those businesses. And so it's a great place to just start looking for local businesses, lots of different options. And it really, I can't emphasize enough how many businesses have taken their operations online. And it's worth giving them a call if there's something you're looking for and they don't have it on the website. It's really worth just giving them a call and asking kind of what the options are, because they may have, like Curtis mentioned, personal shoppers or other things beyond their whole inventory being online.
And
Oh,
Curtis,
I was gonna
go
also,
ahead.
if you are a Press Herald subscriber, which you all should be, then we actually mailed paper copies of our gift guide with Sunday's edition. And so 11,000 copies in the Portland area went into Sunday's paper. And so you might have a paper copy of that, perhaps, that hasn't been recycled yet. So you can dig that out and look for it.
That's great. I was going to ask Curtis if there is anything analogous to this Portland Gift Guide website on a statewide level, or if there are other regions that maybe have a website or something that people could point to find retailers in their area.
As always, I rely on folks like Mary Alice and various downtown business associations. I live in Topsom. The Brunswick Downtown Association does a lot of similar things that Mary Alice does. So there's a lot of different groups across the state that do that. And then there's programs like the Bowie Local program, which is out of Bangor Savings Bank, which is a different way to pay and get different discounts at retailers and businesses and restaurants across the state. So there's a lot of different programs out there, and we just urge people to poke around in your area, be familiar with your local downtown business association, be familiar with your local chamber of commerce, because they can be a great resource for you.
There's
great.
one I should mention. It's a new organization and we've just partnered with them. But Black Owned Maine is a organization that kind of came up in June in response to the George Floyd murder and all of the other police violence. But so they have launched, it's blackownedmaine.com, and they have a directory of Black owned local Maine businesses. So that is a great place to also kind of start your shopping. And we partnered with them to launch a pledge for retailers to say that they'll shift 10% of their spending power to Black owned Maine businesses. So it's a great way to kind of keep the money in our local community and kind of make sure that the wealth gap is beginning to close.
That's great. I guess I'll move on to the next question. Maybe this could probably be for either Mary Alice or Curtis, but maybe I'll ask you both. The reader says, I would guess that a high expense retailers have is rent. Are there any programs you know of that are helping these businesses cover that cost? Are there forgiveness programs, or are the landlords working with them? How's it going in downtown Portland?
Heavy sigh.
Uh-oh.
We surveyed our members in what would normally be the height of kind of the busy season in July, and asked folks how they were doing just sales wise, and then asked what kind of support they've been getting. And only 11% said that they were getting material support from their landlords in the form of commercial rent support. The PPP, a percentage of it could go toward commercial rent, but most of it needed to go toward payroll in order to have it entirely forgiven. The statewide grant, the DECD grant that just came out, can go toward commercial rent, but it can't if they've already applied that with PPP. And to be frank, commercial rents in Portland are enormously expensive. It's shocking how expensive commercial rent is in Portland. I have members who pay more than $15,000 a month for retail spaces in the Old
Wow.
Port. And so it's very expensive, and there have not been enough support programs. So if anyone here happens to be a US Senator, that's something to keep in mind. Or if any of you would like to be in touch with our US Senators, that's a great thing to advocate for.
Yes, similar here. Again, we operate in 18 states with 40 some odd different landlords. And it's just been arduous, kind of individual, trying to be collaborating to come to some mutual agreement. And the outcomes ran the range from really great collaborative, positive discussions to others who said, hey, the lease is the lease, and I'm going to hold you to it, despite the stores being closed for 6 or 8 months. So much different than I also oversee our stores in Japan, where they have a much different approach to these things, and there is far more kind of social safety nets for retailers and things of that nature. So I would echo that point. Most retailers are really probably struggling in this area.
That makes sense. Here's another question I think would be maybe a good one for Curtis. Are there certain categories of retailers that are suffering more from a lack of inventory to sell rather than a lack of customers?
That's a great question, and it's not, I would say, not really specific categories. It's specific items, and it may be items you don't necessarily expect. But the best example and the most relatable example that I think people understand is early on when most businesses were shut down and people were panic buying in the grocery stores. That's where we saw a lot of shortages of different products. But even if you go into the grocery store now, and even though those products are back on the shelves, you're now seeing sometimes some different brands than you ever saw before. Some brands you don't recognize. And a lot of what happened was retailers had a shift. They had to find new suppliers for different products. So they started working with a manufacturer or a wholesaler that they didn't always work with. In some cases, price is a real issue. They ended up paying more for that item. But there was a real disruption in the whole supply chain, and none of it was always predictable or obvious. And if you geek out on this stuff like I do between manufacturing and wholesale and supply chain and logistics, but if you think about that whole chain, at any point along that chain there was disruption. So if you were a producer of a raw material and you were shut down for a while, well, then your manufacturer wasn't getting that raw material, and that delayed what they were producing next up the line to the wholesaler or to the warehouser, and then eventually getting to the retailer. So it took some time for things to kind of figure itself out. And then on the other hand, there were other categories that just shot through the roof. As I'm sure Greg will say, it was near impossible to find a canoe in August this year because everybody was buying up canoes. And so trying to ramp up manufacturing to meet increased demand doesn't necessarily happen overnight either. So it's, as I said, it's not categories, it's different items, and we're going to continue to see that through the holiday season.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question that I think maybe Mary Alice could answer. During the first lockdown, small retailers and shared maker spaces were crippled by policies that banned access of any kind to their shops and spaces, not even for shipping or curbside. Are you working with local and state officials so that they will allow some level of access to businesses and artists during the next lockdown, should one happen?
Yes, this was messy. So the city of Portland, to my knowledge, actually was one of the, I actually can't think of another place that restricted business owners to go at all into their stores and do any sort of shipping, even if it was no contact. It was very confusing, the language that they put out originally. I think a lot of people didn't understand that was their intent. And then they issued a clarification that business owners shouldn't be going to their businesses no matter what they were doing. So yoga instructors were told they couldn't go to their studio to do virtual classes. It was kind of wild. So we and a lot of local businesses kind of led a push for the city to revoke that and retract that, which they did. And I don't think the city of Portland is likely to do that again if the worst case scenario happens and we have to go into another lockdown. I mean, things that I've seen in other places were that I thought kind of made things a little more fair for local businesses is that if non-essential businesses were closed, then places like Target and Walmart had to close off sections of their stores that sold those non-essential items. So they could continue selling the food and the things that and toilet paper and things we really need, but wouldn't be able to maybe sell video games, so that those stores remain open and could continue to sell everything while the local stores had to shut down. So that is something that if we go into another lockdown, which I think is truly the worst case scenario, that's the really scary thing for folks. But I think there are some kind of ideas that are out there to make sure that local businesses are on a level playing field. And I really think about this. We talk a lot about the need for people to shop locally and the consumer driven side of things. But I think that example is a great example of how there are kind of structural problems that make it hard for local businesses to operate, and that there is a need for policy that makes it so that local businesses have a fair chance.
How about at the state level, Curtis? Is there any, has there been any discussion about trying to prevent another incident like that if we ever, God forbid, find ourselves in this situation again?
Well, I think there's a lot of important points to raise here is, now that we're 6 months or so into this, there's been a huge learning curve. And I think everybody has learned from the process. And one of the things that I think was really helpful is that organizations like ours and Hospitality Maine and Portland Buy Local and the Portland Regional Chamber, we all worked so closely together when these various things were cropping up. I mean, I spent a lot of time with Mary Alice on different Zooms throughout May, June, and July, trying to update people as much as possible when the PPP was coming out with these various regulations, whether it was Portland or, Brunswick did actually have a similar situation to Portland with that. So, we from a statewide level, we're trying to help navigate that and trying to keep in communication because we're the gateway to a lot of those businesses and trying to keep them informed. But I think now that there was this huge learning curve for everybody. There was no game plan for this. Now we've kind of learned what does work. And although, there are retailers that have had an employee have a case of COVID here or there, you've not seen a widespread outbreak tied to any retailer of any size. And I think that's because of the measures that we've put in place, making sure people are physically distancing, making sure we're limiting the customer numbers, making sure the plexiglass is up, making sure we're enforcing, facial coverings has all helped. And so, yeah, we're hopeful that there's not going to be another larger shutdown like that again, because I think we've figured out a way that we have to coexist with COVID until a vaccine is available and widely distributed. And we're hopeful that's going to be sometime in the first quarter of 2021. But for now, we've been an active partner, as Mary Alice and other organizations with the state, in trying to figure out that balance between keeping people safe and keeping people economically viable.
Mm. Here's a question that makes me think of a follow-up question, but I'll ask what the reader submitted first. Will seniors and immune-compromised shoppers be given special hours? Will there be a need for volunteers from the public or organizations? And I would add to that, just in general, what advice would you give to seniors and immune-compromised people that are that need to get their holiday shopping done as well? Greg, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, really two options. Certainly shop online if you're comfortable doing so. And I would hope that every retailer is making accommodations for this at-risk population. We recently stood up appointment shopping prior to opening and post-close, whereby these individuals or others could select a dedicated time slot and essentially have the store to themselves. I was out touring our stores last week in a variety of states and heard some pretty heartwarming anecdotes of some people within, elderly or at-risk populations that hadn't left the home in many, many months. and were afraid to do so, but took advantage of the early morning appointment service, and we're just quite joyful about it. So if retailers aren't doing that, they should be doing that in every instance.
Mm. Are retailers, Curtis, across the state offering things of that nature, specifically for folks that have that extra concern about their health?
Yeah, early on, most were, and I think over time it has changed a little bit because they either saw that the need for it diminished a little bit. But I would urge folks to reach out to a specific retailer and ask what kind of accommodations are available to them. And so, like we talked about before, aside from just shopping online, a lot of these organizations may be able to do the shopping for you. They'll help figure it out what you need and try to accommodate, or let you know what hours of the day are really the better hours to come in.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, I guess I feel like I should give each of you an opportunity to just give us kind of your parting thoughts, anything you want, people to stick in their mind as they move ahead and go into their holiday shopping mode. Mary Alice, do you want to kick this off?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my message always and forever is to support the local businesses, because they're the ones who make our communities really unique and really special. And I think people have really understood that message this year, which has been really fantastic to see. We saw organically people spouting across the country the need to support the local businesses. And I think an important thing to understand is that their cash situation is frightening often. What they have for cash on hand is really limited. And so this holiday season is especially important in order for them to get these last round of sales in before what is often a very quiet stretch of months in January through March. And as the person pointed out, they're not getting enough support in terms of commercial rent or those other fixed costs. And without another round of relief likely to come until maybe late January or early February, it's just critically important that the consumers buoy these local businesses that really can't survive unless they see the dollars come in and can make these costs paid for. So that's my message. Is it's always important, but these next 6 weeks are particularly so.
I see. Greg, how about you? Any parting thoughts?
Yeah, we just reiterate the notion of, shop early, ship early. We have yet to kind of have winter weather, so weather has been unseasonably warm of late. So it's coming. So if you are thinking of purchasing some of those winter sports items or outdoor type items, you better act fast, because per the supply chain and inventory story, those items are going very fast. And just a huge note of gratitude. We successfully, back to the hiring point, successfully hired 1,200 seasonal employees
Wow.
this year. It was a slow start, but ended on a great note. And just the caliber and quality of associates that we're able to bring on was just really exceptional. So stay safe, and hope to see you out in our stores or any of the local stores. But I would just reiterate that let's support one another and keep each other safe.
Thank you. And how about you, Curtis? What are your final thoughts tonight?
Yeah, I know we're all tired. We're all stressed. This has been a very long year. But the holiday season is when we need to take an extra measure of kindness and patience and understanding, and recognize that we are truly all in this together. We all need everybody's support to get through this together. I'm looking forward to 2021, turning the page. But it's critically important, as Mary Alice said, to make sure that our local retailers are still going to be there in 2021. So they do need your support, but they also need your kindness and understanding as well.
Well, thank you, all of you. This has been a really interesting discussion, and I really appreciate your taking the time to talk to us about it.